The Rusted Glow by E.F. Brinton. Chapter 1. It was anger that finally turned him. Anger that swayed him to the cause. The bishop of the back streets had wanted him for years, and Tomatov Kochenko knew the man wouldn't care the reason. The bishop had been amassing power for some time now, but once he'd become a leader for the Crows, his desire for able-bodied fighters had only increased. Tomatov knew he would be a prize in the bishop's eyes. Lean and muscular, strong, calloused hands, deep brown eyes, sun-dark skin, and a mop of ringlet hair. And if that wasn't enough, he was a state-sponsored mechanic. One could hardly ask for a more appropriate recruit. Covered in engine grease and motor oil, Tomatov stood before the bishop, seething with the flames of a passionate hate. "There is nothing more useful than rage, Kochenko. Rage will give you strength and clarity. It will give you the courage to make change you never thought possible. The fires of anger will burn city walls and rebuild something better from the ashes. I am sure we will find plenty of use for you, for someone of your talents. For now, though, you must stay at your post." Tomatov could hardly keep the incredulity out of his eyes. Seeing it, the bishop clasped Tomatov's shoulder. "If you are going to work for the Crows, you will need to learn to come to heel." The bishop leaned in, his voice growing quieter. "You are an intelligent man. You understand the benefits of having people on the inside, eh?" That deflated Tomatov a little. The bishop nodded at him with a small smile, patting his shoulder gingerly. He was right. Tomatov did know the benefit. As much as he wanted immediate action, there was a deeper strategy at play. Change would not be instant. The bishop would take the long bet. It had taken him nearly a year to recruit the mechanic. Tomatov wasn't sure what he'd been expecting, but there would be no instant gratification here. How long before I can do something? How long before I can make them pay? His voice wavering between anger and desperation. The bishop shrugged. "That I can't say. It could be a few days or a few years. Revolutions aren't built in a day, Kochenko. But I assure you, I will give you the tools to fight back against the oppression that we have been afflicted with." He paused, seeing the dissatisfaction in Tomatov's eyes. "The next time we have a meeting, you'll get an invitation. Don't be late. And perhaps, in the meantime, you can think of what kind of contribution you would like to offer the cause." The bishop poked Tomatov's chest, harder than Tomatov appreciated, but the comment softened his expression regardless. "Fine. Well, then it's decided." With a nod and a wave, the state mechanic was dismissed. Tomatov's walk back to the mechanic's apartment was cold, his mind turbulent. The injustice that he had turned a blind eye to for years was now refusing to be unseen. "It's real gold, I swear. My grandfather had a good job. He wanted to impress my grandmother." The desperation was clear in the woman's voice as she tried to convince passers-by to buy a tiny ring. Tomatov knew that her desperation would make her a target. But then again, maybe she was the one preying on pity and kindness. Though there wasn't a lot of that to be had in the capital city of Karenya these days. An icy gust clawed through the air. He pressed his hands deep into his pockets as the weather bit at his bare fingers. Passing a gaunt woman throwing strips of wallpaper into a boiling pot, he scrunched his nose. The stench of the glue stock violated his senses. Not quite the smell of blood, but close enough. Grime, intestine, whatever chemicals they used to set the paper itself. It was a pervasive smell. The fog of it wafted through the city. No matter how many times one might smell it walking past a fresh pot, it was never less likely to turn a stomach. The stock was disgusting, but it was edible, and edible was the best that many in the streets could hope for. Gray buildings peered down in contempt at the people below. When did they become gray? He wondered. He could have sworn that they'd been colorful and cheery when he was younger. The sound of sobbing drew his attention. Palace officials were dragging a woman and her toddler out of a tenant building. Threadbare, tattered fabric was all that guarded them from the elements. The city had long been an unusually temperate region, despite the latitude, but those with keen perceptions knew that it had been growing colder in the past decade. Now, one could certainly feel the brush of winter throughout the season, especially so far from the palace. "Please, we have nowhere else to go." Her words found no sympathy from the officials. "This is where the pipe is going. The Caesar needs to communicate with the front," the official said, his tone flat. Tomatov's jaw clenched. Yet another concession of the people to the Caesar. He briefly wondered if he should offer to let the woman and her child stay with him. But he knew that that wouldn't work. A mechanic's apartment was no place for a child that young. Too many hazards for prying hands. What's more, he doubted that the state would even allow it. He'd been so proud when he was offered a state-sponsored mechanic position. Now, 3 years later, he was disgusted by his naivety. Rag-clad children were fighting in an alley over scraps, and for a moment Tomatov stopped to stare at them, his dark eyes pensive. He couldn't help but wonder if that would have been his life had he not been taken in. He felt sure that he might have at least looked similar. "You have a fire in you. Don't let it consume you." His gut knotted and twisted. He had come to his decision in anger, something the woman who raised him would have been disappointed by. But he couldn't just stand by anymore. Like most state-sponsored housing, the mechanic's apartments were above the shop where he worked. Tan brick was coated in a fine film of dirt and engine residue. The small windows appeared to be tinted, but that was from the dirt the mechanics were too tired to clean off at the end of the day. The hours were long when you worked for the state. He and the 4 other sponsored mechanics that lived there worked under Mudak, who was shockingly mediocre. Despite being a master mechanic, the round, middle-aged man had no imagination or creativity, which Tomatov felt was important for innovation. The whole purpose of state sponsorships was to improve the sponsor's given industry, a thing Mudak was very unlikely to ever achieve. The large bay where vehicles were pulled in was open, even though it was after hours. Outside, a man with only one leg, wearing a tattered army coat, balanced on a crutch. The dark circles highlighted his dull eyes as they glanced wearily around the street. Murak was holding a prosthetic mechanized leg. "I don't know," he said, shaking his head. "With these busted wires and the illegitimate transfer, it's certainly not worth market value. I'll give you 10 roslati." Tomatov punched the doorframe as he entered the shop. An intact leg was worth more than 3 times that, illegitimate, busted, or not. It was all he could do to keep himself from punching the man who regularly charged more than official state prices. "Oi, Gochenko!" Tomatov stopped and took a deep breath, regretting his outburst. He needed to calm himself. Mudak was a small-minded man with an oppositionally sized ego. He would no doubt be scolded for his frustrations. "Yes, sir?" Mudak trundled over to him, the legs still in his hands, glinted in the evening light. It was in much better condition than the old man had made out. "There was a truck here earlier." He paused. Tomatov's throat tightened, and he had to make himself stop from shifting his body defensively. Mudak let the words hang in the air, trying to make the younger man uncomfortable with the silence. "There was a truck, but I see no ticket, no money. And then you were gone all afternoon? What am I supposed to think?" Tomatov's mind raced. He doubted that Mudak would have followed him, but what if he did? What if he knew about the bishop? Would that be enough to charge for treason? Or sedition? Or what even was the difference? Tomatov stopped himself. Mudak was literally in the middle of an illegal mech purchase. Something he did regularly. There was no way this man would want to draw any kind of attention to his shop, even if there was a reward. This old man would not intimidate him. They let the silence stretch out, longer and longer. Both men were square with each other, and Tomatov would stay there all evening if he had to. Mudak's bald head wrinkled. Next time you pay your whore with work, you don't do it in my shop unless you plan on making a show," he muttered as he wandered back to the amputee. A shaky breath escaped Tomatov. Mudak hadn't realized what happened. Better yet, he didn't suspect him of any unfavorable behavior towards the state. Tomatov forced himself forward, feeling emotions he'd rather not overcome him in public. He dashed up the stairs to his own apartment, taking 2 or more at a time. The events of the day had taken their toll. Everything was catching up to him now. By the time he closed the door, he was gasping for breath. He leaned against the door, looking into his apartment. Tools and material littered every surface. The emotion enveloped him, and he let himself sink to the ground. How did things come to this? When did they get so bad? How hadn't he seen it before today? Had it always been like this? His hands were shaking. Ragged breaths escaped him as he battled his emotions. "I swear you'll catch your death from those feelings." He struggled with emotions. Keeping his temper in check was always a challenge. He wasn't sure he'd made the right decision, but there was no going back now. The swelling churn of his mind threatened to overwhelm him. He squeezed his fist tightly, swallowing back his feelings. And then they were gone. "So you've heard, then?" She gave a small nod. "It's all anyone is talking about." "How is Ausha doing?" "As well as you'd expect." Kovask sighed. "It feels like I'm abandoning her. You and I both know there's still a good chance she will be the one to inherit." "Regardless, she'll be safe here." He gave her a skeptical look. "Safe? You know as well as I that they can't sustain this much longer. Every one of those jackals holds a knife, and they will plant it in as many backs as they need to get at her when the time comes. She will never be safe. How can I look her in the eye knowing that?" "You can't choose where the Caesar sends you. Ausha knows that. She will miss you terribly, but there is no sense of judgment for it." "No sense of judgment from her, maybe. But it's the Caesar's judgment that grows more questionable by the day." She shot him a warning glare. "Oh, what else is he going to do? He won't kill me. Powerful people like me too much for him to risk that. Either way, I won't hold my tongue any longer. The amount of stress he puts on her. She's barely even an adult yet. She puts that stress on herself. The boy will inherit, yet she still takes on the responsibility. And that is why it should be her. And yet, the boy was the one born with the gift. Kovask snorted. All the good that's done them. Days passed, but how many, Tomatov could not be certain. Stacking tires, twisting wrenches, refilling fluids. It was all a blur. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Hammering rivets, the scent of wallpaper stock. Mudak making an obscene profit on the amputee's leg. Work, eat, sleep. Orphan wranglers, books burned for warmth, another wave of injured soldiers returning from the front. Fixing the salvaged mech, more alterations to make for the poor, limbless bastards deemed worthy by fat bureaucrats. Even going north to May's gambling hall with the other mechanics offered no release. She hadn't said anything to him yet, but he could tell by the way that she looked at him, and how little she was speaking, that she knew. She still hadn't said anything by the time she'd gotten to stacking poker chips, and he'd had enough. Oh, go on. Get it out of the way, then, he grumbled at her. May glanced at him, but continued to say nothing, her short red hair bouncing as she moved. He glared. I know what you think of the bishop. Go ahead and just say it already. She placed another glass in front of him and poured before returning to the chips. You're right. He's power-hungry, he blurs the line between what is and is not acceptable, and he's an ass in general. But he's the captain of the Crows in my district. What am I supposed to do? I'm sponsored in the boot. I can't just leave. I'd be arrested for desertion. I want to do something, and right now the bishop is my only avenue for that. He hadn't realized how heated he'd become. With a sigh, he slumped back over the bar. May touched his arm gently, her dark brown eyes staring intently into his. Welcome to the Crows. I'm glad you're with us, she told him. May's approval helped Tomatov get through the following days. She agreed that working with the bishop, while not ideal, was the best way for Tomatov to join the movement. The only problem now was that the bishop had told him to consider what he wanted to do for the cause, and he didn't have the faintest idea. What did a person do to change the status quo? So when he received the note, he felt wholly unprepared. He folded and unfolded it several times throughout the day. It read simply, Tonight, the bishop. Waiting for sundown, he paced the streets. This time, he'd thought to bring a coat. Weather-worn and time-weary shutters were closed to the elements, few braving the rain. He felt the dull street somehow made it feel even colder than it truly was. Turning down the street to the bishop's lounge, Tomatov paused. Out of the corner of his eye, bright blue and yellow reached out to him. It was a propaganda poster. One of many he'd seen since the start of the war. This one was different, though. A watercolor woman in a blue gown with a long braid was holding a spear, appearing to be leading men into battle. The artwork by itself was captivating, but more so was what it had to say. Mechanics wanted. New designs rewarded. Competition to be held for the army. Best mech incentivized. Successful candidates will present to the Caesar. Tomatov carefully removed the poster, haphazardly stuck to the wall. Reading it again, he knew that he had several blueprints that he could adapt for such a competition. For a moment, exhilaration rushed through him. But then he looked up. Just like that, the excitement curdled within him. Beneath that poster was another, one he'd seen many times before. Tighten your belt for the troops. Rationing helps keep food in our soldiers' bellies. He stared at it, a strange realization washing over him. He'd seen that poster before the war across the ocean, back when they were only fighting the savage nomads in the east. Looking at it, he saw, like the mech design poster, it had been slapped on hastily. Reaching up, he peeled that one off as well, letting it fall to the ground. Below, he saw another colorful depiction of battle. "Border raiders are threatening our way of life. You can help. Volunteer now." He was less delicate ripping the next one from the wall, or the one after that. In total, he tore 12 posters down, now crumbled at his feet, the first one still clutched in his hand. This was not new. This had been going on as long as he could remember. Tomatov Kochenko had only one thing on his mind, and it was a plan. Entering the ruddy old lodge, Tomatov looked around. It was chaotic, and he wasn't sure where to go, until a tall, brutish man with a large scar trailing down his chin appeared before him. "You the new recruit?" he asked gruffly. "Tomatov." He introduced himself with a nod. The man grunted in acknowledgement. "I'm Laszlo. Follow me." Through the rumble of the evening rush, Tomatov tracked the big man to a room in the back, where he was introduced to a handful of people and told to sit at the end of a long, worn table. The room was small and gray. Thick curtains were hung to dampen the sound for anyone who might be attempting to listen in on the outside. When the bishop appeared, a hush came over the crowd. Everyone was silent, waiting for him to speak. "Tonight, we have a new member to introduce to the fold. Crows, this is Tomatov Kochenko. Have you thought about what you would like to do for the cause?" the bishop asked. Tomatov nodded, standing from his seat and raising his head high. "I'm going to kill the Chasar," he told them, "and I know how I'm going to do it."